start with, as a subcommittee, or because we do not have a quorum, we have now 3 members of the legislature here. I'll let them, if they wish, to make introductory remarks. I'd like to kind of finish this hearing in about an hour and a half. So we have, I believe we're going to have 4 panels. I know you've engaged in work, all of it, all of you. It's really inspiring. You know, it's good to have some fresh ideas up here, you know, in the legislature. And so it'll be very fascinating for us to hear some of your recommendations and the panels that we're going to be participating in. I believe we'll have 4 panels this morning, but I'd like to first acknowledge and welcome some of the following student representatives. Mr. Ronak Ahir, who is the president of the California Association of Student Councils. He's a senior from Leland High School in Santa Clara County, and he's in the class of 2012. I'd like to welcome him. I'd like to welcome Ms. Victoria Lader, who is the Education Policy Director for the Student Advisory Board and for the Association on Student Councils. She is a senior from Lowell High School in San Francisco, also in the class of 2012, and I may do some damage to the pronunciation, but you'll have to tell me. I think it's Demita Radanov, who is the Governmental Affairs Program Director and is also a senior at Redwood High School in Marin County, also in the class of 2012. And I know there are many, many other students here that have had an integral role in the development of the topics for presentations that are going to be coming, so I apologize if I have not acknowledged you. We will acknowledge you, especially when those that are on the panels. For the general public that may be following this on television, the format I'd like to follow for today's informational hearing, which has been discussed with the student representatives, is as follows. The appropriate student council representatives will be coordinating the student panels, of which I believe there are 4. There may be 3, but my understanding is that there'll be 4 student panels. The students themselves have self-selected themselves who they wish to present the topics. I'd like to keep the discussions flowing and the presentations flowing, so I encourage all the students to be conscious of the time. If we're going to have an hour and a half, maybe 15 to 20 minutes on each panel, 20, 40, 60, 80, you know, and then the rest we can have, you know, whatever discussions. And I'd like to begin now. I'd like to ask if any of the members as we listen to these student recommendations, if any of our members wish to make an introductory remark, please go forth. And I see Senator Liu itching to get started. No, Senator Liu.
Well, I just also would like to extend my welcome to all of you. Every year that I've been in the legislature and have sat on this education committee, you have participated annually and really enjoy your ideas and thoughts. And as the Chair Senator Lowenthal suggested that, yes, we could always use some fresh ideas. And I also would like to welcome a young lady from my district, from South Pasadena High School. Well, she's not exactly, I don't have it yet, but in the 25th Senate District, which I will be having in the fall, Chloe Acebo, would like to welcome you to the panel today. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Anyone? Senator Hancock?
Yes, I'm also very interested in what you're going to have to suggest to us today, because I have found over time that students are often you're the people that live with the issues every single day. And you have very, very good ideas. So I hope we can engage in dialogue in case there are some of them that we don't think are such good ideas. But also, are there students here from Oakland Technical High School? Oh, great. I hope you're going to be presenting Kimiko and Case, yes? Welcome. We truly look forward to hearing your best ideas and giving you, hopefully, some of our feedback. Thanks.
Senator Price?
Yeah, I just want to welcome the students to the
Is your microphone on?
I don't know. It's on now, I think. Anybody from Los Angeles? All right. LA's in the house. Always from LA. But I want to welcome everybody to the Capitol, first of all, and to your participation in this process. I was a former student council person. I know what a challenge sometimes it can be, but it's also very fun and very rewarding. And opportunities like this are really learning experiences. So I hope you'll have a good time, learn a lot, and we look forward to your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And with that, three of the four of us have just spent the last hour talking about pension reform, so this has got to be more interesting than that. So with that, I welcome our first panel and that's really up to the students, I believe, to kind of come forward and let us know who you are.
And maybe Victoria Leader will lead them.
And Victoria, you can kind of introduce the members and let us know how we're going to proceed this morning.
So I just want to give you guys a little introduction to our proposals. So my name is Victoria Leader. I'm this year's Student Advisory Board on Legislation and Education Director. I know that I speak for the students here and for the 6.3 million students across California when I thank you all for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. We are also grateful that the board has, for the past 13 years, allowed students of California to inform you of their opinions through the Student Advisory Board on legislation and education process. In these trying times, it is refreshing to see legislators who are so willing to recognize and take into consideration the voices of California's students. In times like these, when the California education system is so widely regarded as one in dire need of reform, when the nationwide recession threatens our integrity and future as people, it is students who should stand at the forefront, whose future should be considered above all else. Because in the end, it is today's youth who will determine our state's tomorrow. This year, students have realized now, more than ever, there is a need for open dialogue between legislators and the primary stakeholders of the education system. This morning, they will express to you their views, their personal experiences, and their testimonies on what it means to be a student in California, and what desperately needs to be changed about that reality. This morning, the students of California have gathered to present you with 4 proposals for the reform of the California education system. Yet, I am excited to announce that these proposals are unlike any that the Student Advisory Board on Legislation and Education has ever presented. This year, California students have decided to take stances on big issues in education. They have decided to take stances on California's education funding, to propose action for the incentivization and qualifications of teaching. And they have sought to address justified school absences and to reform the 10-year system. They have done all this as individuals whose entire futures will be shaped by the 13 short years in the K-12 education system, and whose futures are shaped by the policies and actions of their elected officials, the abilities of their teachers, and the quality of their schooling. The students of California are speaking, and I hope you will listen. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panel and our 2 speakers, Ronak Ahir and Jordan Fury.
No, I think you shut it off.
Hello? Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's all yours.
So first and foremost, I would like to thank the Senate Education Committee for granting Sable and the California Association of Student Councils the opportunity to present their ideas and opinions on the state of education in California.
Please introduce yourself so it's on the record. Your name.
Yeah,
Everyone that comes up on the panels, first introduce yourselves, your name and where you're from, so we have an official record.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Ronak Ahir. I am a senior at Leland High School in San Jose, which is in Santa Clara County.
And I'm Jordan Ferry. I'm a senior at West Campus High School here in Sacramento.
Welcome.
Okay. So what better way to start than to address the issue of valuable student input and feedback and how we actually give that process through SABLE. Many students that wanted to come to this conference weren't able to because their schools didn't excuse their absences and said that they had to stay in school. But on that issue, we want to address why excused absences are justified for programs like this that demonstrate life skills development and many other scenarios that apply to real-life application rather than just practical classroom learning. So, on numerous occasions, students who desire to enact change in the education system have been hindered by their own teachers, administrators, and schools. In order to attend a conference such as SABLE and present in front of the Senate Education Committee, every student in this room has made a specific sacrifice. That is, they've went up to their administration and they've, in some cases, begged to come to SABLE and to come to Sacramento to voice their opinions. That is, they've missed 3 days of school, and because of these 3 days of school, many schools, many administrators, many teachers say that this is not a valuable right for students to come and present their ideas because they think that missing instruction is a problem. And that's true because administrators and teachers often are wary of student absences for fear of a loss of funding and important classroom instruction. After all, continued school attendance often leads to higher standardized test scores, more motivated students, and increased graduation rates. And CASC as an organization believes in school attendance, and that is very important. However, many conferences, such as those hosted by the California Association of Student Councils, augment classroom instruction. That is, they add innovative practices and hands-on approaches like the process we use at SABLE to develop these proposals to make sure that students are wary of what's going on outside the classroom rather than what's going on only inside the classroom. Programs like the Student Advisory Board on Legislation and Education and the Youth Action Summit of California offer a valuable addition to a student's learning experience. Not only do they provide for life skills and professional development, but they allow for alternative and innovative methods of teaching, such as CASC's very own peer training program, which we've established and used at SABLE to influence a teenager's school career as well as the rest of their life. So for my example, coming from Leland High School, I benefit from having a good relationship with my principal and with my administration. But with that being said, since there is no specific mandate or anything written in the education code, I often have to say that this is a very community-based involvement program, or look to loopholes, because administrators and teachers simply don't think that this conference is justified enough to miss 3 days of school. And not just this conference, our Youth Action Summit of California, which emphasizes community involvement. And it's pretty hypocritical and ironic from my opinion and the opinion of the delegation that if someone wants to say that they were sick, they can easily just excuse that absence with a note. Yet when we are here working day and night on proposals, that doesn't count as an excused absence. So as a result, when I come up to certain teachers, since the administration doesn't enforce this right of an excused absence, the teachers also don't follow it. And as I speak in front of you right now, I have points being taken off on assignments that I should be able to make up because I'm working here and I will come back to school and work there. But as a result of some teachers just being stubborn and not abiding by what the administrators think or what my principals think, I'm losing points while presenting in front of you today. We had another situation in which 2 students from the California Academy of Math and Science wanted to come, but their administration barred them from coming just because they thought that they were missing too much school. And as a result, there's these valuable input and feedback which we're trying to give you, and the process is already here, but so many delegates are not able to come because there is no specific mandate that justifies why life skills development programs are extremely important and why they should be excused, such as this one.
So in addition to my participation in the California Association of Student Councils, I'm a delegate in the YMCA Youth in Government program. Existing education code lists attendance of a conference which focuses on the legislative or judicial process as a justified reason for absence. Therefore, my participation in the Youth in Government program is not only an excused absence for my school, but it also allows my school to continue collecting average daily attendance funding for my absence. The Student Advisory Board on Education Legislation and Education recommends that the Senate Education Committee amend existing education code to deem the attendance of conferences which provide life skills and professional development as excused absences. In this way, more students will be allowed to enhance their educations with legitimate and effective training that CAS conferences provide and which they would otherwise be unable to access. In all, we hope that you will recognize the simplicity and common sense by which this proposal operates. By allowing students to be excused from school to attend CAS conferences, you will not only ensure that schools and students are free from the damage of absence, but you will also allow students statewide to be provided with experiences which are unique, educational, and life-changing. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I have some questions. As
Yes,
the
sir.
author, as the author
Yes, sir.
of the legislation that enabled youth in government, the YMCA, to receive, we went through extensive hearings here in the Capitol to allow that to happen, because you're right, we have over 2,000 students that come here for a 3 days in early February.
Last week.
And they were,
Last week, actually.
That's right. And they were not really, up until recently, able to have a justified absence. We held hearings on that, and I think it was very appropriate. As I say, I was the chair of the Youth in Government and also the author of the bill, and the governor signed the bill. But the devil is in the details. And so what I'm going to ask you is to get back to us. Does that mean that every kind of life development or human development would be justified? Who would determine that? Would it be for-profits if they're running, we see all the time, life skills development? Would they be eligible? Or would we narrow it down to specific kinds of programs in which there are either large numbers of students applying or that there's a public benefit to that, a purpose to that? So what I'm getting at is I like the concept. I've been an author of that concept. We've been successful. But to take it to the next step, it's going to take more work for us to understand just what you really mean and what would count and what wouldn't. And could students have an unlimited amount of absences? How do we deal with those kinds of issues?
If I might comment on one thing that you said, in terms of profit or nonprofit organizations, the current legislation, as I'm sure you know, it specifies nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, that's right. That's
so
what we did.
we're merely amending that code to after the words legislative and judicial process, as well as life skills and professional development, life skills training and professional development from nonprofit organizations. So we're asking that to still apply to nonprofit organizations. But I do understand your point on it's definitely a very slippery slope.
And that's what we hear a lot, and it's nice for the students to hear this, that when we have lots of good ideas, that much of the opposition to them comes from not opponents who kind of don't mind that a specific program, but they see this, as you pointed out, potentially as a slippery slope or the camel's nose under the tent, or whatever term you want to use, that we're opening it up to a vast array of excused absences, when in fact we should be narrowly or just clearly defining what our goals are and how those goals and those programs will actually enhance the educational mission of students. And so somewhere in there we have to deal with that issue, because if you just open it up and say, what did you see, life development
Life
skills?
skills development.
That could open up to almost anything. And so...
Would you mind if I asked you a question?
Certainly.
Is it possible to specifically cite an organization such as the California Association of Student Councils in that legislation?
Well, we certainly can sit down and work on that. That would be one of the steps that we would begin to really start that negotiation, that they would come up with a list or somebody would come up of appropriate kinds of programs, because I think the more open-ended, even though I love this concept, but the more, because you're right, this really enhances and it makes your participation, it enhances your educational program. Your being here today enhances. All of you should be receiving justifiable I think this would fit in. But there are lots of other programs that some of my colleagues would say, hey, wait a second, we're opening the box. How do we, too wide, how do we define that? And I think that's going to be one of the issues that come up as we deal with this issue. And I'm not here to impose and say, I know what should be or should not be. I was real clear with Youth in Government because we had thousands of folks here. It was a wonderful experience. We support that. And we were losing so many students who couldn't, because, as you pointed out, these were not justifiable absences. And that was the legislature was able to be convinced that it was appropriate to provide that in the that as a justifiable. But if we move forward with enhancing that, it's going to be up to you to justify that and to work with us and to make real clear how wide we're opening this up. But I like the concept, don't get me wrong. Yes. And Senator Liu.
Just a little clarification. Rona, are you not getting excused absence today? Or for this participation in this group?
As of now, I do not have an excused absence.
And Jordan, you do?
Yes, but I have not received an excused absence for other conferences hosted by a CASC.
Okay, but here we have two school districts that are interpreting the Ed Code differently.
I think right now it's really up to since it's not in the Ed Code, I think right now it's really up to the individual school district to make that determination. What we did was to clearly say that previously that Youth in Government was to be part of that.
But Youth in Government, okay, and you do, and I understand that Model UN and
right.
Boys and Girls State are also called out.
They were also included.
And are those three other groups, do they meet on weekends and then appear in the Capitol
yes,
for
they
one
have,
day?
No, they meet. Well, I don't know about all the groups, whether they meet. I just can talk for Youth in Government. They have a retreat in January, I think it was, in Monterey, and then they come up here in February, and then they work usually not during school hours in their own districts right. after school. So those are and the excused absences are for the representatives that come here or go to Monterey.
I'm a former school teacher, so I know that at one time in my career I sponsored Model UN, but that was a weekend program, where the we went down to the Model UN at one of the UC campuses, and the kids took their own time after school to, brush up or study their own country that they were representing and things like that. But your program, is it during school time or after school? How do you meet and talk about issues that you want to come together on?
Okay. So programs like this obviously are during the weekdays because we tailor it to when the hearings actually are. It's not like we have the specific decision or the freedom to say, oh, we want to meet on this weekend. With most of our conferences, it is like that because for the Student Advisory Board on Education, when we're dealing with the State Board of Education, it is dependent upon when the State Board meets. So that obviously is going to be not on a certain day that is favorable for us, but we're just meeting their expectations.
So we just make it harder for you to...
No, it's not like that. We want to be here.
Yes, I know you do, but you're missing school. But yeah.
And also, for example, our Youth Action Summit of California, it's a 3-day-long conference, so unfortunately we have to, one of our days has to be on a Monday. So that's a problem for students missing that day of school. And then we have regional conferences statewide that students are sometimes not allowed to attend because of this. So, yeah.
Right.
And a lot of our other programs, if they don't deal with the legislative process, they deal with leadership training because we are a peer. We are a student organization that seeks to train other students in leadership skills through peer tutoring and peer mentoring.
Great. That's great. Okay, that's it.
And I just want to make a quick comment about the open-ended. This is the last comment.
Yes.
The open-ended concept, it was a theme of this conference, specifically with this delegation, to stress that this is not necessarily a time where we are delivering our proposals verbatim to you, but since we don't have the time for 3 days to research all the loopholes and play devil's advocate for every single scenario and situation, but we wanted to make sure that it's a dialogue, and as you perfectly stated, it's bringing fresh ideas to the table, and this was a legitimate concern.
We agree that this is a legitimate concern. I think now the hard work begins.
It's a very legitimate concern, and it also fits in with something that many of us are interested in, which is experiential education.
Right.
You can learn a lot more by doing sometimes than by just reading about something.
Right.
But just so we all contribute our stories, I carried for several years a bill that was suggested to me by a class of students in Lafayette, which was a district I represented in the assembly, part of my district. And they had been denied school time for volunteering at the polls on Election Day.
That's right.
Remember that?
I remember that.
Did we finally get that bill passed and signed? I remember carrying it endlessly. And then,
Well, I just always remember having that bill come up all the time. But
Yeah,
I don't
right.
remember whatever happened to the bill.
and sort of, a couple of us began to hand it off. We kept
That's
doing
right.
it. We need to find out. But there's a term here that we use a lot called as defined. So what we need to do, I think, is excused absence as defined. And you've done quite a lot of definition. But it would be interesting to follow through with it, because personally I think it's something that would contribute a great deal to real education for kids.
That's right. I mean, I think that the difference between getting a great idea and getting things done is all the discussions that we're having now. And this is where we start with an idea, and those that want to work with the legislature or with a particular author will need to dig into these kinds of issues, because this is what, what we've done before is done more piecemeal. I think what you've done is, we did for poll workers. We really haven't done really as much for experiential learning as Senator Hancock has said. But we picked out something that we thought was important to start that process, or youth in government. And now you really want to talk about general category of life development. And that may be, and I like the idea, but we're going to really have to work on that, or you're going to have to find those student leaders that want to work on that are going to have to really kind of sit down with some of the staff or legislature to, if we move that forward, and figure out exactly, who's going to, what are we talking about, who will oppose the bill, who will support it, how do we build a larger coalition, because no matter what you want to do, there will be opposition to it, and it's just the very nature of the beast, and so we need to be able to work on that, and it's part of the learning experience. But I think it's a great idea, and I think, as I say, we only deal with it frequently by someone coming to us and saying, hey, this is a program, why aren't we getting credit, and then we work on that, rather than opening up and figuring out what is the general concept that we really want to support. So with that, I want to thank you for this.
Thank you very much for your
And
time.
we'll follow up on that. Victoria, are you going to introduce the next panel, or shall we just move forward to the next panel? Let's just move forward to our second panel of our four. Categorical funding.
Good morning, Senate Education Committee and also members of the state legislature. My name is Denzel Perry. I'm a senior at Dominguez High School in Compton, California.
Welcome,
Hi.
Denzel.
Hi, my name is Cass Rittenberg. I'm a senior at Oakland Technical High School in Alameda County.
Hi, I'm Annie Hadley. I'm a junior at Moorpark High School in Moorpark, California in Ventura County. We are here today to discuss our concerns about categorical funding, and we thank you for having us. Your child is sitting on the floor in her biology class because there are not enough desks for her to have one. Earlier in the day, she was kicked out of her calculus class because there were too many students. Meanwhile, her school buys smartboards through a state technical grant. Smartboards that she can't even see from her place on the ground. Her school and district were forced to put money into technology that they did not need and could not utilize because it was funneled into that category, even though her school didn't have the general purpose funds that it needed to educate its students. We, the Student Advisory Board, believe that there is too much money allocated to categorical funding and not enough freedom to reallocate that money on the local level for what schools need, which forces schools to buy the unnecessary items in a time when they cannot even afford materials necessary for basic learning. Schools know what their own problems are. They know what they need. Putting restrictions as strict as they currently are on their funding forces them to buy what the state deems necessary, even if the school does not believe that it is so. Not every school is the same. Not every school has the same problems. But sometimes they are forced to spend on the same programs, even possibly programs that they do not have. We don't want to go to schools where we may have some of what we want and nothing of what we need. Hard economic times are causing cuts to be made, and we definitely do not want the shortage of money to take a toll on the more necessary parts of school. Because schools can't have everything, we want them to at least have the ability to decide what programs are important to them and then have them choose what programs should be affected by the suspension of categorical funds. We don't want to have smart boards that our teachers don't know how to use when we don't have desks. Our learning is jeopardized not by lack of funds, but by funds being tied up in useless categories. This must be changed. In this proposal, we seek to reform the allocation of categorical funds. Here is how.
Yesterday morning, when we came here to talk to our representatives about current issues in the education system within California, we began to learn more about Governor Brown's proposal on education funding. As we began to fully understand his proposal, it became very clear the striking parallels between our initial ideas and the governor's ideas. Categorical funding was initially created to provide support to extra programs the states want to see the districts administer. However, as time has passed, these programs are no longer given the attention the states initially desired. The money is now no longer being used to fund these extra programs. It is now being used to fund programs that the schools cannot function without. One of the main points of the governor's proposal would eliminate categorical funding from everything except for a few areas that would remain restricted because they cannot, under any circumstances, afford to be cut. Among these programs would be special education, state preschool, and K-12 internet access. These programs would remain Tier 1 categorical funds. We, the Student Advisory Board, believe that this type of restriction is very important, as it ensures that these special programs get the funding they need and deserve. The general idea of categorical funding is opposed by the Student Advisory Board because it makes too many strict guidelines as to where the districts can and cannot spend the money. It is in no way, shape, or form always effective or even efficient. Given the current economic financial problems that the state's education system is faced with, it would be even more inefficient to keep the money where it is in categorical funds. The flexibility of his proposal is a step in the right direction towards improving education in California. For instance, in my school district, in Oakland Unified School District, in the beginning of the year, our leadership class did not have enough desks to seat all the students. Each day became its own competition to see who would show up first and get a desk. Those that filed in last would have to sit on the floor and hopefully learn for the next day to show up earlier. In the meantime, while no new desks have showed up in our leadership class, what has shown up are 50 new iMac computers in our basement, the funding for which came from a categorical grant for technology from the state that was given to our district. Because the money was tied up as a categorical fund, it cannot be used in the places that our district and school needed. This catastrophe could have been avoided. Given the cuts that have to be made to the education system, it is even beyond inefficient to have the possibility of this type of event occurring. In this instant, we are only able to have some of what we wanted, but nothing of what we needed for our school. Governor Brown's idea would allow districts to allocate the resources based on what they thought the schools truly needed. As we have established, schools know what they truly need. In general, Governor Brown's proposal plans to make education funding more equitable and based on the needs of the students from their respective districts. Overall, given the current economic situation, cuts will have to be made throughout the education system in California. This, unfortunately, is unavoidable. Now, what we can choose is who decides and where these cuts are made. We mostly agree with Governor Brown's proposal, but would like to see a revision before we can fully endorse it. Under Governor Brown's proposal, schools would not be able to determine what they want to cut and pay for because they would not be able to pay for the programs that do not have categorical funding, which would not be beneficial to any of the districts in our state. If this proposal were not to pass, schools would not be able to voice their opinion as to what funding should be cut. Instead, the money would be used to pay for staff salaries and things the district deemed they cannot function without. This power by the schools to choose where the funding is allocated is essential, especially with such cuts coming. We all agree that schools are not the same. Each school has its own problems and programs, some of which they deem to be more important than others. If schools are not given this choice to favor their most important programs, schools around the entire state will be in major financial trouble. We cannot allow the determination of cuts to be based on what programs have categorical funding and what don't. This would be a detriment to the entire California school system and to all of those that come out of the system in years to come.
This is where we would like to suggest a revision in the current proposal. Given the current proposal, the money that is left over after the basic needs and salaries are taken care of is in the control of the district's own discretion. What we would like to recommend as a course of action would be to have the district split up the money left over equally amongst all schools in the district, based on their population of the schools, and then have the school site councils of each school handle the money and choose where to fund. The process in which this would work is a system of checks and balances. This would be similar to the current process of the school site council, but the main difference would be that the school site council will be dealing with more of a general fund provided by the state and the district. If this ability was given to each school-owned school site council, it would allow the schools themselves to take the decisions as to what will be cut next year to meet their projected fiscal year. This way, the school site council can ensure that a school's most important, vital, and admired programs that make their school unique maintains as such funding as possible. If the money was to stay at the district level, then they would decide which areas needed the money and then instruct the schools to spend the money on the programs as the district saw fit. However, as we already stated, all schools are different and have their own needs. Given the heavy cuts that will have to be made in programs next year, it is vital that the schools get complete control over what they can spend money on. Each school needs to have the ability to spend money where they specifically need. There can be absolutely no waste. As a hypothetical situation, if 4 out of 5 schools need money for transportation, but one doesn't, we cannot afford to have that. We cannot afford to have that one school have money laying around for transportation. It will be more efficient and effective to have those 4 schools have their own school site councils decide to spend money on transportation, because then the school that does not need money for transportation could directly allocate that money as to where they truly need it. The school I attend needs more assistance in administrative positions. But because there is no money in that category, our school decided to hire a data specialist, which current job duties have nothing to do with data. This particular individual is paid to do that are things that are not of their job descriptions. However, if the school budget is more flexible, the schools do not have to find loopholes to allocate funds. This revision to the current budget would ensure that no waste comes up as a result of this. And given the current situation that the education budget is in, there's absolutely nothing more important than ensuring that all funds are used as correctly and as efficiently as possible.
There is too much money in categorical funds and too little freedom to use it outside of the funds. We want to extend the ability of our schools to allocate funds for themselves. We want to make sure that the needs of our schools are met. We believe that Governor Brown's proposal, with our revisions, will ensure that schools have the funds that they need to pay for the programs that they value most and cut programs that are not needed. If school site councils retain their power to allocate funds and are held accountable for funding it properly by checks and balances, then they will ensure that the programs that are valued in their community are funded. The school site council system works because the people that allocate funds are invested in the programs that receive those funds. Imagine if the people that actually knew where the money was needed chose what to cut and what to keep. Students would be happier. We would have the materials that we need for our education in these tough times. Who needs a smartboard if they don't have textbooks? Who needs iMacs if they don't have desks? The money pumped into categorical funds is deemed unnecessary by lack of general purpose funds to build upon. We have special programs with no general education to build upon. We suggest that you support the governor's proposal so that schools can decide where cuts are made. Our school site councils and school districts should decide where our money is needed and where our money should go. We support Governor Brown's proposal with our revisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And first, before I make a few comments, I'd like to acknowledge in the audience today we have former Senator Gary Hart, who was the former chair of this committee, probably heard some of these very same or similar recommendations. And plus, there's a class from Rio Americana High School, and so we'd like to welcome Senator Hart and the students from Rio. Welcome, Senator Hart. You know, you make a very strong case for moving from categoricals to much more of a block grant, let schools decide, and you use terms like give schools, they know what they want, complete control, let's do what's truly needed, get rid of useless categories, cut programs that are not needed. While that's all true, and we are moving in this direction, there's another side to this story. And that other side is that we have a system in this where we have a system of majority rules, but the protection of the minority. Many of these categorical funds were put into place because schools who had, let's say, just a few English language learners said, hey, I want to move my programs over to here, and those students were completely left out. And so there's a reason for categorical funds when there are individuals that the school may think that is really not necessary because they're the ones that decide what's necessary and what's not. But then students who make up a small block of students sometimes lose those funds, and they don't get the additional funds that the legislature says really are needed. And so the question of what's needed and what is not is in the eyes of the beholden. Just because the school site council, which is made up of a particular group, the majority of that school, does not mean that specific segments of that school population, their needs are going to be met. And that's really where the balance has to be. How do you provide greater flexibility of what you're asking, but still protect the rights of minority, and the minority in the general sense of what we mean by minority, not necessarily just minority students, but minority points of view that the state has said these are populations that must be served. Have to be served. So somewhere in that, we struggle with that as a legislature. And then the other point of view is if we move towards categoricals, away from categoricals into block grants, where is the accountability? How do we know that those populations that were being served before, that their needs on a long-term basis are going to continue to be met? Is that built into this flexibility? Do we measure, is flexibility, giving schools flexibility, but yet understanding how those funds were originally allocated and who is impacted by them? Are their needs being met? Are those funds tied to making sure that schools are held accountable for those students also? I think what you're asking us to do is what we're struggling with, and I think it's a great issue, and it's really, but it's not just that all of these programs are useless, that all of these programs are not needed, and that you have the infinite wisdom to know what is really, or even some members of a school site council, what is needed and what's not. Lots of times those programs were there because those schools never responded to the unique needs of some of their students in that, and so it needed the state. Yet you also raise the issue at times we're wasting money, we're not providing flexibility, people at the local level are in a better position, and in general we agree with you and we are moving in this direction. But it's not, there will be some people who will lose access to resources potentially could in some school districts without any accountability, and they were not useless programs for their families, special education or unique needs of low-income students, families. And so we have to hear the other side also as we make this debate. But you're right. Push us to deal with this issue. We should not be leaving wasted money, as you're saying. We should not have students sitting on the floor while we're getting smart boards. We get that. But it's not just about smart boards. It's about human beings also whose needs potentially may not be being met, too. Yes, if you'd like to respond to any of that, or any of other members.
Case, you identified 3 categories that you wanted to help preserve. How did you arrive at those 3?
Under this proposal, there are a few more that remain Tier 1 categorical funding restricted. So those are the 3 that we thought would probably be the best present to you, just to understand how these restrictions do maintain some sort of requirement for funding of special programs.
Okay, and do students get a seat on the local
school site council?
School site councils?
Yes, my school, we do have students sit on the school site council. We have 5 students, and we also have a student board member, which is myself.
How about your schools?
We discussed this a lot. We weren't sure, and I believe that we found a law which states that there must be at least 1 student on the school site council for every school. Whether or not that is actually enforced very well, I'm not 100% sure, but it is currently a law that there must be a student.
And do all of your school districts have a student that sits on the school board?
Yes.
Yes.
So, there is a student voice?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. I would agree with Senator Lowenthal, because I chair this Senate committee on the budget subcommittee on education, and we have been struggling, as everybody knows, through this awful recession, and schools have been unfortunately hit the most because you are a big target. And I think one of the ways that we have addressed this is to allow more flexibility in categorical funding. But as Senator Lowenthal said, there are going to be winners and losers here, and who do we protect? And that fine line is a very difficult one to walk. But we certainly agree with your presentation, Annie, that we should not be sacrificing space in classrooms for smart boards, et cetera, that teachers don't know how to use. So, we hear that. So thank you.
And to address what you said earlier about about how some schools wouldn't get the funding they necessarily need for the type of students they have, the formula, the weighted student formula, distributes the money based on like the ESL of the ESL level of the school, or if the school has lower income students. So that itself would give some districts more money than others. But as you said earlier, who's to hold the schools accountable with that money?
Right, and I think those are the answers, the questions. How do we deal with accountability issues, especially accountability? Does there have to, if schools are eliminating a particular kind of program, do they need to, and putting it into all into flexibility, do they need to have public hearings on that? Do they need to have, do they need to document where those students were, how well they were performing before when there was category, and now that we're not actually targeting particular populations or particular needs, how does that occur later on? These are all questions that we really need to make sure that we're dealing with, because you're right, we're really trying to address the issue of how do you provide greater flexibility at the same time ensuring the protection of those students who historically have been, their needs have been underserved.
Go.
One answer to one of your questions, we develop a system of checks and balances, which will basically, after the school site council comes up with a plan and a budget, a layout of where they want to place their funds, they will submit it to the school board. And the school board will review it and approve or send it back for further revisions. So we did take that in consideration, and we thought of a system of checks and balances.
I think that's great. I think that's really getting at beginning to deal with the issue of accountability, because as Senator Lieu pointed out, there will be winners and losers out there in doing this, and we want to be able to hear and understand what impacts there will be, and not just in terms of people's statements, but that we can actually track and to see, as we create greater flexibility, what happens to those. Do we lose some students along the way? And so that's really what we need to grapple with. Senator Hancock.
Yeah, I think what we're grappling with here is, what does an accountability system look like that's fair? Maybe in a subsequent year, you all could look at the issue of, is a standardized test the way we hold people accountable? What are the ways that a school could be held accountable for meeting the needs of all its students, or as many of its students as possible? I don't know that it's necessarily up. It's only up to us, it seems to me, to define a very broad measure or multiple measures. Many people feel that the standardized tests are particularly helpful to either teaching, learning, or accountability. And it would be good if you could look at that. In a previous life, I worked for the U.S. Department of Education, and my boss, who was the Secretary of Education, a guy named Dick Riley, used to say, hold them accountable for results, not minutia. And unfortunately, a lot of our categorical funding and some great deal of our testing can be holding schools accountable for minutia. So if we can agree on the definitions of a successful education and hold schools accountable, I would agree with you. And I think the governor's proposal is moving right along those lines to allow schools the flexibility, and some of your suggestions are very, very good in terms of some minor revisions. So do you think they're all expressed here in as much detail as you've talked about them? Because I've been kind of following, and I don't think it's as clear. So if you have some specific suggestions, I think this committee would welcome them in writing, because we're going to be having to act on some of the governor's recommendations.
Including the issue you're saying, well, the governor is moving towards a weighted formula. Well, we have not seen a policy bill, and full discussion of that too. We would like to see, that put into and I mentioned that at the hearing on the budget. I would like to see that put into a budget or into a policy bill that comes before this committee, because just to assume that there too, we conceptually like the idea, or maybe a great idea, but it's got to be fully vetted. There are implications to that. Some school districts will be hurt by this, and so we need to see that in writing. We're not just going to assume now that that you're just going to add on or be based, that the proposal is based upon this new weighted student form, because we haven't had a fully chance to vet it and to look at that like any other policy, regardless of the fact that it may be coming down the road and it may be a step. There are lots of implications to that, and we in this committee would like to see that before we talk about now adding on flexibility to it. We'd like to see that fully vetted first. And so, again, there are lots and lots of issues out there. You are touching on the core of where we're going as a state, but it's still needs more. We here in the legislature need to work with you and other groups out there to understand just exactly what are these implications, including the weighted student formula, which you've just brought up.
That's good.
Well, that was fascinating. Thank you. We're going to keep moving. No. You've touched the chord, so that's real good. These are issues that, you're right. As I think it was Victoria who said at the beginning, you're dealing with some of the largest issues that the state is dealing with. These are not just minor changes. What you just touched upon that in terms of first justifiable absences, and now here about the movement towards greater flexibilities, giving the control, decision-making at the local level. This is critical for us to be dealing with. But as we say, we need to kind of examine that and understand what those implications are. And not because we're opposed to it, that's our job. Because if you don't, there are unintended consequences. And when there are unintended consequences, somebody loses something that we just weren't thinking about because we didn't vet it fully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anybody going to be doing about a part-time legislature? We don't want you to come up if you are.
Okay. So, update.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kunal Shah, and I'm a junior at Mariloma High School in Sacramento.
Hi, my name is Isha Lal. I'm a sophomore at Granite Bay High School here in Sacramento.
Welcome.
Hello, I'm a senior at Rosary High School in Fullerton of Orange County.
But your name?
Sarah Murray. On behalf of the Student Advisory Board on Education, Legislation and Education, I'd again like to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to listen to our proposals today. For the past 3 days, we have focused on teacher incentives and qualifications. Our utmost goals are to create quality teachers and make the profession attractive for top-tier undergraduate students. To me, a good teacher is passionate, personable, and knowledgeable. I want to spend my winter breaks looking at criticisms of Hamlet and just analyzing the overture of 1812. Luckily, I have a teacher that has impelled me to do that. My AP English teacher has an incredible passion for Shakespeare and an infinite understanding of the history of literature. Thanks to this teacher, I would readily discuss Shakespearean theories with friends and go to art galleries in my free time. Most students throughout the state have had the fortune to be taught by teachers just as passionate as my AP English literature teacher. Unfortunately, too many of us students have had the low-quality teachers as well. Sadly, those teachers are often malinformed and inexperienced and lack interest in teaching itself. In my AP US Government class, for example, my teacher has asked my class to teach chapters to the class because he sometimes, as he once stated, doesn't feel like it. Even worse, a student delegate at our conference divulged that his 7th grade geometry teacher used the student's test as a key because the teacher didn't know the answers to his own test. Again, great teachers make significant impacts on student lives, as do poor teachers. Indeed, economists and professors have found that students with top teachers are less likely to become 1, pregnant as teenagers, 2, more likely to enroll in college, and 3, more likely to earn more money as adults. So the intuitive question then is, why do we even have low-quality teachers to begin with? Ultimately, we found that 2 major factors pull top-tiered undergraduate students away from the teaching profession. 1, the monetary value of becoming a teacher is low, and 2, a social stigma exists with entering the teaching profession. Obviously, many persons become lawyers or doctors because they can, in the long run, fully help them pay off student loans from their undergraduate schools, and those jobs pay well. As for the social stigma associated with becoming a teacher, we decided that this condition arises due to the perceived ease of becoming a teacher.
The California Basic Education Skills Test A requirement to the credentialing of all aspiring teachers requires a passing rate of only 51%. Just recently, we passed out a sheet of paper to all of you, and I would like you to please take a look at these questions for a couple of minutes. I'm asking you all to determine what you feel is the question from the CBEST test. And when you have an answer, if you could let me know, that'd be great. Go ahead.
60 hours.
Oh, I was asking which question you thought was from the CBEST test.
Oh, which one is from? Oh, I didn't know. We thought you wanted us to answer all.
Oh, no.
Which one is from the CBEST?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it two?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
So
two
the-
is the easiest one, right?
Yes, it was. So the first question is from the 7th grade STAR test. The second is from the CBEST test. And the third and final one is from the SAT 2 math subject test. So now we can see a parallel between the 7th grade STAR test and the CBEST test when we see that oftentimes the 7th grade STAR test can actually be believed to be
More
easier and the easiest of all the 3 questions in this test. Our first proposal today is to increase the requirement for passing the CBEST test to 70%. Today, when a person applies for a career in education, they only have to provide whether or not they passed or failed this test. Now, we think that it is essential that we change this in that we believe that we should break down the points in which each person gets, and on the transcript for when they do apply for the job, it should be clear what points and what numerical value they really did get on this test. That way we can be sure that people actually try and put a good effort into taking this test. We advocate that the Senate Education Committee mandates that the numerical score is broken down to reveal the specific points obtained in each section. We suggest that the committee reassesses the CBEST test and implements necessary changes to the rigor of the content in order to ensure testing at a basic skill is in a qualitative manner. The second problem that we did find was that a lot of students lack incentives in order to become a teacher. This is primarily because teaching is not seen as a pursuable career in our society today. Many top-tier college students would much rather pursue a career in law or medicine. We hope to solve this problem by reimbursing a portion of the tuition to the top 30% of college students who are seeking to commit at least 5 years in a career in education.
So the aforementioned proposal could lead to improved results in schools across California, not only within the test scores and comprehension of students, but the quality and longevity of teaching that comes with the plan. Improving the quality of education means better and more inspired students who could contribute to the improvement and the growth of California. A good foundation in K-12 education allows students to be more aware of the importance of school and potentially enter the teaching profession themselves. These students would be incentivized to become teachers not only by seeing the nobility of the job as well as its necessity in our world, but by evident reimbursements and economic benefits of teaching that would occur if the proposal was enacted. The improvement to the CBEST by raising the standards of passing would make teachers more accountable, responsible, and knowledgeable in the basic skills tested on the exam. In the education system, students are constantly being held accountable for their scores and tests. In turn, prospective teachers should be held to equal standards as they will be imposing such rules upon their future students. Raising the passing requirement would require potential teachers to place more effort into preparing for the exam, which would be positive in not only making the success of passing the exam more valuable, but would ensure teachers are highly competent in these basic skills. Making the passing threshold higher for teachers would also garner more respect for the profession, the respect that this job has long deserved. Ensuring that CBEST scores are also seen by employers and the like is also necessary to ensure that there is increased transparency in the education system as well as the hiring process. In the status quo, it is impossible to discern whether potential teachers understand the content of the CBEST with basic comprehension or absolute proficiency. This makes the process unfair for those who work harder to score well on the CBEST exam. Making sure that scores are visible on applications ensures that teachers can be rewarded for their efforts. Making exam questions more difficult would lead to a dramatic improvement in the capabilities and the potential of our teachers. Our teachers are the ones setting the foundation for students to grow, so it would be unfair to the student and the profession if we kept the questions at such low levels of difficulty. Finally, providing the incentive of reimbursement to potential teachers would make a large-scale impact on the quality of teachers who enter the workforce. Paying for an education is a significant barrier to receiving one. We can mitigate the pressure of paying for college by providing such reimbursement incentives to those interested in the teaching profession, as doing so would attract high-achieving college students who turned away from the profession due to the high cost of receiving further education. Through making these changes, we will see a significant improvement in the quality of the public education system, which will in turn produce better critical thinkers and high-quality citizens for our future. To conclude, it is necessary that teacher quality be changed for the better, one step at a time. We can take the first steps today by passing initiatives to raise the standards of CBEST examinations, increase transparency for these exams, make some of the exam questions more difficult, and provide reimbursement incentives in order to bring better quality teachers and better quality education to our students. As Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." We need these teachers to be the most outstanding basis for these students' future growth. For them to see clearly into the future, these teachers must become those giants. Thank you.
Excellent. You know, what's interesting about this, again, I'm just going to jump in and ask my colleagues also to jump in. You're really talking about, all right, we have to raise the standard in terms of who can come into teaching, who can teach. And at the same time, teaching has to be competitive with other professions. We have destabilized education by not really making teachers competitive. So the best are not going into that, whether it's incentivizing resources while they're going into it or paying them more compared to the other. So you have this kind of, and you realize this is just the first step, that you're not talking about raising teachers' pay, but underlying what you're saying is a change in the paradigm of who goes into teaching, how we reward them, how we hold them accountable, how we professionalize teaching, really professionalize and compare. I have one question to ask you. Do all of you support the governor's tax initiatives coming up to protect what we have? Because you're really asking us to spend more money. We don't have enough money to get those kids off the classroom floor, and now we're going to provide additional resources. Does everybody here support additional resources for education and in the governor's incentive? And are you going to be vocal about that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Good. I want to hear something coming out of today about the need for additional resources and that you support it, because you're asking us to spend more money. And we're with you, but right now, given the existing situation, if we spend another penny, we're taking it away from preschool, or we're taking it away from higher education, or we're taking it away from seniors who are living on fixed incomes, who are trying to live independently in their community, and we're going to take away their health care. So somewhere in this system, we have to figure out, and you're saying, hey, the real core problem, one of the core problems is that we have diminished as a society the role of teaching. And if we're going to really solve this problem, we have to really recognize that we have to hold teachers to a higher standard, and we have to monetize this situation in a much better way. I'm saying I don't think you're going to get any opposition up here, but the question is, what are you going to do this year to help us move in that direction? And that's really what I think we're faced with. And so I want to hear people out there also talking about that. That's it. Senator Hancock.
Well, I will second all that. I hope, that we find that one of the things people know very little about is actually the state budget. Budgets are considered boring. Unfortunately, they define everything that is possible for us as a state and for our schools. And, unlike the federal government, states cannot run a deficit. So we have to balance the budget every year. We've had a series of initiatives and propositions that limit the amount of money we can spend or how we can raise the money. And in California is one of about 8 states only that require a 2/3 vote for any increase in fees or taxes, or even having an election to see if people want to continue the taxes they already pay, or closing a tax loophole that only took a majority vote to put in. So until many of these things change, we're in a zero-sum game. And for those reasons, the governor is proposing a tax increase on the ballot this year, and it's going to be important that you guys, your parents, the organizations they belong to, your communities, think about really what that means. Because I'm going to quote my old boss again on the subject of teachers. He used to say, you want to hold them accountable as professionals, treat them as professionals, and pay them as professionals. And right now, teachers who have probably one of the most challenging jobs, one of the most rewarding, but one of the most challenging jobs in our society, are often not paid commensurate with the enormous value that they contribute. And part of that is because there is not the money to do that. Also, a lot of the categoricals and the other accountability systems we've discussed today mean that teachers have to spend more time than they would like teaching to the test, and less time than they would like having experiential learning opportunities for their students or other things. So, the CBEST is a problematic thing. I have to say, when I reflect on my own children's teachers when they were in school, some of their best teachers were quirky individuals. They had a 4th grade teacher that ran her class like a Marine sergeant. One of my daughters had an 8th grade teacher that was sort of a flower child, and you just couldn't quite figure out what was going on, except everybody learned 4 years of math in 1 year. So I think that in some ways we have to recognize that teaching is a passion and being an artist with young people, and figure out ways of recognizing, rewarding, and fostering their opportunities to be creative.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very much. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sergio Lopez, and I'm a junior at Leland High School in San Jose.
Good morning. My name is Chelsea Lim. I'm a senior at Palos Verdes Peninsula High School in Rancho Palos Verdes.
Oh, I used to represent you. But no longer. No longer. They kicked me out when I left the assembly.
Good morning. I'm Brandon Berry from Placer High School, Auburn, Placer County.
Good morning. My name is Michael Abbott. I am a senior at Terra Linda High School in San Rafael, California, Marin County.
Good morning. My name is Ricky Hu, and I'm currently a junior at Mariloma High School here in Sacramento.
Welcome all.
Good morning, members of the legislature. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here today and express our views as students. Our group addressed the issue of teacher accountability, specifically in regards to the abolishment of the teacher tenure system. In the current system we have in California, teachers automatically receive tenure after 2 years of service. This means that they receive permanent position status and requires a due process system that makes firing tenured teachers nearly impossible. While the current system has good intentions, it is not what is best for the students. Students should receive the best education possible. But because the qualifications required for a teacher to receive tenure are not indicative of their daily classroom performance, ability, or effectiveness, the well-being and motivation of students suffers as a result. As a student advisory board on legislation and education, we believe that it is of vital importance to abolish the tenure system and instead adopt a multifaceted teacher evaluation system which will evaluate teachers' effectiveness. We recognize the arguments in support of tenure, but if we are to maintain a high standard for education, it is imperative that we remove the tenure system. The reason this is such a crucial issue is because poor teachers have such a long-lasting impact on students. A recent study conducted by researchers from Harvard and Columbia Universities showed that having a poor teacher has the same effect on a student as missing 40% of the entire school year. Meanwhile, the same study found that one effective teacher can actually increase the combined lifetime income of his or her students by $700,000. As students, we need to have the best teachers in our classrooms, and we strongly believe that adopting a merit-based evaluation system will be best for both students and teachers.
Now, we have some personal stories regarding our experiences with the teacher tenure system that we would like to share with you. But please keep in mind, we do love our teachers, and we recognize that in our daily lives, we come across teachers who do make that difference, and they inspire hundreds of students. Our goal today is definitely not to fire teachers. However, every now and then, we do encounter some teachers who do not meet the standards required of their profession. And we have found these problems becoming more prevalent. And we believe that it is important for school districts to adopt systems to evaluate teachers based not only on the number of years that they have served, but also by their skill.
And so this controversy of teacher accountability is pervasive not only throughout many schools in California, but throughout the United States as a whole. And one personal account of this is reflected in one of our group members who attends Granite Bay High School here in Sacramento. A history teacher receiving tenure led his classes and lectures through non-innovative and not uninvolved PowerPoints, as well as the showing of movies that did not review relevant curriculum. And so this unsatisfactory teaching did not supplant the curriculum necessary to meet the students' testing standards. And so in a broader perspective, this in turn results in a larger burden placed upon the subsequent teachers who then have to uphold not only their own responsibilities, but also the responsibilities neglected by the previous teachers who had become complacent due to this tenure system. And under this system, this teacher who lacked the motivation to progress in his or her methods of teaching holds a permanent position regardless of his or her quality of instructing the students, whereas a non-tenure teacher who may be more enthusiastic or competent would be selected to be the first to go. This current system upon which teachers may obtain tenure has had negative repercussions on not only the students, but other teachers as well. And the job security provided by teacher tenure has elicited complacency and a lack of motivation among some teachers to improve the quality of their teaching.
Now, this is just one of the many examples that illustrates how a student's education, as well as another teacher's work experiences, may be jeopardized by the current teacher tenure system. And unfortunately, this system has not only impacted the quality of education provided, but it has also hurt the success of many school co-curricular programs.
The impacts of ineffective teachers can reach much farther than just one class. These effects can be felt through entire programs and even through in different schools. I experienced this firsthand, just how far-reaching these effects can be in the band program at my middle school. The atmosphere in the program was simply not conducive of an enthusiastic or educational environment, and this caused many of the students to drop out of these classes. The number of students in each class dropped so low, in fact, that the jazz band class, which is what inspired me, really cultivated my passion for music, to be cut. And because this middle school is the main feeder to the high school that I currently attend, this trend continued into the performing arts department of the high school, which is one of the most valued at the school. Student enrollment in the band programs at my high school have dropped to roughly half of the numbers of previous years. The high school teacher, in fact, sent a letter to the middle school expressing his extreme dissatisfaction with the band program at the middle school level, singling out the teacher there as the root of all the problems. At this time, the middle school administration and the district board also tried to take action towards termination of this teacher. However, they were severely hindered by a cumbersome due process which is required by California Education Code. Now, 7 years after I first entered the band program at the middle school level, action has finally been taken. However, the due process and the actions taken have only resulted in a simple reshuffling of personnel. They were not even able to fire this teacher despite the negative effects at the high school and middle school level. During this time, the band programs have only continued to deteriorate further and further. And it is these types of teachers who are unfairly protected by the current tenure system, and it is these types of teachers who schools are unable to fire due to a due process that is long, tedious, and very expensive.
But students aren't the only ones who have expressed their dissatisfaction with the current teacher tenure system. According to a study that was conducted in 2009 by the New Teacher Project, 81% of administrators and 58% of teachers stated that there are tenured teachers on their campuses who are performing poorly. However, the current due process required to remove an unqualified but tenured teacher has prevented many schools from being able to replace such teachers. And so when it comes to abolishing tenure, we actually find that some teachers are also on board.
Last hired, first fired. Growing up, I've heard this phrase quite a lot. I was practically born into my school. Some current teachers of mine were actually there when I was born. In addition, my parents are both educators at the same school for about 20 years and have witnessed the effects of tenure has had on teachers. I asked my dad if he would be worried if tenure was abolished and was replaced with a merit-based system of evaluation. His response was, "I don't particularly care if it stays or goes. I'm not worried. I teach my students the curriculum in a fun way that they understand. My students respect me because I respect them. The students' motivation and enthusiasm in the class, as well as their demonstration of academic performance, proves that I am doing my job. As long as I am having fun and they are having fun learning, that's all I can ask for. There is no way that tenure being abolished would affect teachers who already do their jobs." My parents' concerns with the tenure is simply that if tenure teachers are classified as qualified teachers, why do they need tenure? Why do they need job security? Through my eyes, as well as through my parents' eyes, the result of tenure being abolished is only that it would weed out underqualified or undermotivated teachers. This shows not only what students and administrators think of tenure, but what two tenure teachers think of a program that supposedly provides job security. In their opinion, tenure is not the most effective way to provide job security for qualified teachers or provide our California students with the best possible education.
Now, we believe in the efficacy of utilizing a merit-based evaluation system as the most beneficial way to determine teacher employment. Consequently, the Student Advisory Board recommends that the legislature, first, remove the teacher tenure protection clauses of the California Education Code, thereby eliminating permanent employment in the California state education system. And second, implement a multifaceted and merit-based system that includes evaluations provided by teachers' peers, students, other administrators, the principal, and as well as a value-added component that is reflected by standardized test scores to assess the effectiveness of a teacher. Now, clearly, the teacher tenure system has had widespread and long-lasting implications on students, on teachers, administrators, and all facets and all levels of our education system. Now, the qualifications to receive tenure are not indicative of a teacher's performance, nor does the current system sustain an environment that is conducive to long-term student success. As students, we are the primary stakeholders of our education, and we are directly impacted by the decisions that are made in this very room. And so it is our hope that you will take these recommendations into consideration and that you will help us create an education system that will enable us to thrive, grow, and ultimately reach all of our dreams. And so we thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing your feedback.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and some. You started out by saying we have a tenure system in which teachers are granted tenure within 2 years, and it's not working, so let's eliminate the system. You did not say, let's look at the tenure system and make it better. You said eliminate it and go to a merit system. I happen to be, before I came to the legislature, a faculty member at the California State University, Long Beach. Go Beach. And a tenured faculty member. Now, I believe, I don't remember whether it's 5 or 7 years, you have to, with multiple evaluations beforehand, before you receive tenure, and it's a very serious thing, and you are evaluated on an ongoing basis on multiple things, not just the first year or two. And so my questions to you are a couple. Why do you think we have a tenure system? Are there any benefits to the tenure? You've laid out what the problems are. 2, are there going to be unintended consequences? We're really talking now, after the last panel, we're underpaying teachers. We do not have ways in which we're setting the bar at high enough standard, is what the last panel said, nor are we professionalizing. If we eliminate now, given the same climate now, and move to a merit system, who is going to go into teaching? I would like to know, when we're underpaying them, holding more accountability, are there going to be, or should we modify the system? And the third one is, do you now also propose that the next step would be to eliminate tenure at higher education also, the CSU and the UC? And have you heard from faculty and students there that they want to eliminate tenure? Or is it the problem with the way the tenure system is done through K through 12? I'd like to know if sweepingly we should eliminate tenure everywhere, or is it the problem in the system, and are there going to be unintended consequences as we switch from one system to another? Because you've made a strong case for merit system, best teachers, but we're talking about real people out there, not the isolated cases that you're talking about. And the question is, what will be the long-term impacts? Is it a system that can be modified? Or do we follow what you're saying, just eliminate it? And should we do it for everybody?
Well, Senator Lowenthal, just to answer your first question about whether or not it would be appropriate to go forward with just eliminating it instead of addressing adjusting the program by which teachers earn tenure, we addressed that question many times in our discussion, and we had found that if we evaluated a teacher to give them tenure, that would certainly prove that teacher was qualified to be a teacher. But then what after the tenure? How do we prove that teacher keeps his qualification, keeps up his motivation in the classroom?
Well, what they do at the CSU is that once you've received tenure, your promotions are not based upon automatic promotions every year. You have to go through a review every 4 or 5 years to be promoted, and to go from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. So by having tenure does not necessarily mean that there is not still ongoing evaluations and consequences for student performance and teacher performance. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't. All I'm saying is that we have to, I would like at least you to look at other models out there, because you're saying throw the baby out with the bath. It's not working. We know examples of it's not working. We're not going to modify it. We're just going to get rid of it and move to an entirely new system. And I'm saying, do we do that in every level of education? Or is it that somehow college professors are better and able to be good teachers? We don't have to do that? Or are there ways in which we can understand what are the benefits, and especially at a time when we're not recruiting people to go into teaching because they think there's no future in teaching?
Well, just to address you keep citing the CSUs as an example.
I just said my own experience was as a CSU faculty, and I don't think you would get a lot of support to eliminate tenure, the 7-year process, which it took to get tenure and ongoing evaluations at the CSU. I don't think you would hear that tenure has been the problem with faculty teaching at CSU. Or UC.
But frankly, that evaluation system is not present in most K through 12 education.
And I agree with that, but you're not advocating changing that system. You're advocating getting rid of tenure.
Additionally, we also feel that tenure in itself, this idea that this kind of impenetrable job security is in itself causing some sort of complacency in many teachers that we've seen. Again, we are drawing from our own personal experiences in the K through 12 K through 12 education, when we presume through higher education that the idea of impenetrable job security in itself causes a complacency in the teaching, which does not encourage innovation in the teaching styles or any kind of experiential learning or different approaches.
I want to really commend you young people, because half of your panel is dealing with the most important part of what you experience. I mean, in education, you guys are the topic. I mean, you are the most important segment of where we all address our issues. Teachers are the second. They are the ones who stand in front of you or beside you or behind you, trying to coax you into a knowledge base, an appreciation of whatever it is that their discipline teaches. And you have picked on or identified issues within the profession that you have experienced that say, well, we could do better than what we're getting, essentially. And I think they're talking about a K-12 system. I don't think they're talking about higher education.
They're not. You're right.
And a tenure system, when I was becoming a teacher, was a 3-year system. And now it's a 2-year system. And and the former senator that was here, Senator Hart, was here in your chair as part of that when we converted to a 2-year system. And there was a deal made with the teachers union. So, what is lacking here is the representatives of the teachers who could come and have a conversation. But I kind of disagree with you, Chairman Lowenthal, because I do think because education has been battered by lack of resources, this is a time for a conversation about what is it that we need to do in order to make the system better, more efficient. I mean, just because when we're fat and happy, we don't make changes, essentially. We tinker around the edges. But when we don't have resources, it really forces us to really examine what we are doing and how we're doing it and how we're delivering services. So, I mean, I think, for those of you and the young people who are involved in this program, you have really thought about these topics as how it pertains to what you're experiencing today. And most of you who are seniors, et cetera, will graduate in June and move on to higher education and experience folks like Senator Lowenthal and have wonderful experiences at the universities, because you will have, you will be more focused on a particular topic to graduate in and pursue as careers. But this general education that you are going through now, I mean, we have struggled in the Education Committee, I think, for a long period of time talking about qualifications. Who is to become a teacher? How come our CSUs accept folks with C averages? Why can't we boost that up, kind of thing? We have an experience with Teach for America. I don't know whether or not any of your schools have kids who graduate from our top universities who have wonderful degrees, et cetera, who come into our urban areas and, experiment for a very short time, unfortunately, but have some success, that young person's energy in a classroom with young people. So there's all kinds of things that are going on that are creating more unrest, more questions, and I think that's healthy. I mean, I really do think it's healthy that we raise these things, and I really congratulate you for honing in on something that's very important to you, who stands in front of you, beside you, behind you in a classroom, who forces you to do things that maybe you hadn't thought about doing before. Good things, I would say. But thank you very much.
Senator Price, do you have any? Want to jump into the middle of this one? This is a great conversation. You have really touched a raw nerve, and it's a great nerve that it's one in which, we're, where the question really to me is, do you modify what we have, or you just get rid of what we have and move to a new system? And
that's a tremendous challenge.
And that is a challenge. And you raise really clearly the need for more effective teachers and the idea that people need to stay as innovative by having the threat that they're going to lose their job. And I'm not sure I buy into all of that when we're paying them nothing.
Okay.
Pay them and then I'm with you. But without paying teachers, I just think that I think we can modify the system, but I'm unwilling at this moment to totally commit to overthrowing a system which has problems, and I agree with Senator Lieu. When we moved from a 3-year to a 2-year, it meant that people were getting tenure before we really saw them in the classroom over time. We didn't do that. And that's an issue. But to now take it to the next step and say, just get rid of it, given the existing conditions that we have that are out there, is a big bite of the apple. But I'm glad you're asking us to do it, because that is we need to discuss that and what are the options. And unless you put that on the table, legislatures tend not to want to move too fast. And so unless you push us and say, hey, this is really where you want us to go, we're not going to be able to figure out and vet this and have everybody at the table. And so I, too, commend you. And I think it's the desire to have people in front of you or working with you or who as your teachers and your mentors who really are passionate, instill a love of learning, help you kind of along the way, personalize education, have meaningful impacts, because also the other part is also true. As much of you remember those poor teachers, who you also will go through life and remember those other teachers that really inspired you. And I will tell you you cherish that, because they will be some of the most meaningful experiences of your life. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do we meet the things that you're asking us, upgrade the quality of teaching, making sure that there are not people in the classroom that are only there because they're just kind of waiting out their time, and not, as somebody's pointed out, well, why don't you teach the class? I'm just too bothered by doing it today, versus those that inspire. And how do we promote that at a time when we have tremendously undervalued education, just in general? And so I'm always concerned about how that balance. I would prefer, obviously, after the last panel, to value education much higher, and to elevate its status, and to set higher demands, but also to reward people for accomplishing that. And in part of it, I think, is an effective tenure system. That's what I believe in, because I'm not willing to throw it out at the higher education, which is an entirely different kind of tenure system than in K through 12. So, but I think that there are lessons to be learned there too.
I think, if I may just add on to that, what we've seen in the K through 12 education system especially is that innovative education techniques are not being rewarded, since we have this tenure system, which essentially we feel unfairly protects underperforming teachers. At the same time, it also not rewarding innovative teachers, and we feel that we need that alternative. But it may not be the tenure system. As Senator Hancock has pointed out before, lots of times we discourage innovation because we put so much pressure on teachers to teach to the test, right, that they're not teaching innovation. They're not doing what brought them into teaching, many teachers. They're not doing, because they're not being rewarded for that, and they're not given the freedom to do that. And if you take away tenure, you take away another potential freedom for those teachers who are quirky teachers or different teachers who innovate, who inspire, who make us love things. And so somewhere in there we have to come to grips with the fact that we have put tremendous pressure on teachers not to be innovative. It has nothing to do with tenure. We've just told them, don't be innovative, do this.
And a lot of that was pointed out in the first panel is based upon the fact that the state legislature now imposes itself on local districts much more. And what people would like to see, as pointed out earlier, is more local control, more local ability to make those decisions. And that's a major change as we're moving back in that direction. I just want to make sure that we do it carefully and judiciously, and that we realize that we may be getting rid of part of that group who are the poor teachers, but you also may lose a lot of good teachers along the way, too. And so we have to think through just what the implications of and how we craft something that maintains those good teachers, because given the present climate, we may lose good teachers also.
Actually, just to address that concern
Yes.
about losing the good teachers, that's exactly why we'd like to make sure that we have more of a multifaceted evaluation system that would
Absolutely.
make sure that we're including the teachers' peers, the students, the administrators, as well as the principal, so we can see, you know, their teaching styles as well as just the different methods that they utilize to make sure that they are the most effective. So we don't believe that any of the teachers who are necessarily good already would have to worry about it, because they would get such strong recommendations anyway.
Well, that's assuming that we would have reliability of measures, and and we agree with you. Multiple measures are the way to go. You know that this, but even in there, we must ensure that there really is the training of the people who administer it. That whatever measures that we're using and whatever goals we set that are effective teachers, that teachers are provided once it's identified. If they have shortcomings, that we have the professional training to increase their skill level. They're provided those opportunities. They're given accurate feedback, and then they're given the opportunities to demonstrate that they can perform. So it's not as simple just as to eliminate tenure and just to say we're going to do multiple measures. Built into that is the assurance that we provide the adequate training both in preparation to teaching, maybe not just passing a CBEST at 50%, as you've said, that we really do adequately train teachers, and that we provide the resources for teachers to enhance their skills as they go through. And that all of this is part of a larger package. It'd be very hard just to pick out one or the other without really providing those resources, because I think what was pointed out earlier was no one here is really attacking teaching. People really like teaching. So we need to kind of always ensure that whatever we do is said in a spirit that we're trying to promote teaching, enhance the opportunities for people to go into teaching, make it a worthwhile occupation, and provide people with the resources after they've entered teaching to constantly increase their skills, and to make sure that those people that are evaluating them, there's reliability and that there's ongoing really kinds of measurements that we want. If we're not just going to use assessments based upon student performance, if that's not going to be the only one, if they're going to use it as what you're saying, then it's really incumbent that we really that this not become discriminatory towards certain administrators not having enough time, so they just bop into a classroom once, or they hearsay evidence. You've really got to make sure that we elevate this, and we really do that. Evaluation is really. We really take seriously how do you implement multiple measures, and how do you ensure both validity and reliability in these measures. We do a lot of that on assessment tests. We don't do as much of that on individual observations and other measurements of teaching, and we've got to spend more time doing that if you really want to have multiple measures.
And we're working on it.
Great. This was the final of the 4 panels, and it really did touch, I think, on one of the most critical issues and one of the most difficult ones for us to come to grips with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you again for giving us this opportunity before you today and to voice the opinions of students across California. And based on your feedback, it seems like the door has been opened for a further conversation between our delegation and the Senate Education Committee. So I look forward to that dialogue. And I hope you were able to gain new insight and see the innovation and passion that I feel these students exemplify. So thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. I just want to say, and then I ask my other colleagues to kind of say some. First, I want to thank everyone for taking the students for taking such an active role in participating in the legislative process. These are timely issues, as we've said. We're struggling with these issues. Your input gives us a particular perspective on how to do things. And more than that, what you're demonstrating here is really the value of project-based learning. Also, you are working on projects that can help us. And you're working in groups, you're engaging in dialogue, you're formulating strategies, and then you're presenting recommendations. Basically, you're providing to this program is providing to you, students, the opportunity to apply what you're learning in real-life situations. I think that is so critical, and and the role of project-based learning is so important. That gets back to the first, why are you being penalized for engaging in project-based learning and not being, we get it. We get it. We hear you real clearly on that. And in your project-based learning, you're challenging us to deal with some of the, some of our most fundamental and cherished assumptions. And you're asking us to re-examine those assumptions and really see whether they're appropriate for today's students. And I think that's great. And I think that's really what our role. And you're doing it because not reading it out of a textbook. You're talking about your own experiences, working among yourselves, coming up with solutions. This is the way education should be. And so I just really want to compliment you. And what you've said today will be part of this discussion. We will work with you. All the issues that you've raised on accountability, on tenure, on the role of teaching, on the issues about the role of students in justifiable absences. I mean, all the things that you've raised today are they're very, very timely. And it's a great time to be dealing with these issues as the beginning of a session, especially at a time when, in fact, education, as I pointed out before, is on the chopping block. We have cut education dramatically. We're going to be going through this horrendous year where we're going to come up short. We're going to come up with a budget that's going to have tremendous cuts and also triggers for more cuts. This is not something, none of us were elected to do this or thought that this is why we wanted to, just like teachers. We didn't think that we were coming to the legislature to decimate everything. But we are going to do our job because we have to have a balanced budget. But on the other hand, we're going to need champions out there to say, help us fund education also. Thank you for coming. Senator Liu.
I wanted to thank for spending the time with us today, and thank you for the recommendations. I have a little curiosity. Maybe the ED who does this group, you come to us every year with recommendations. I'm just curious as to whether or not the legislature pays attention. Is there anything that you have done that we have enacted, or recommended that we have enacted? Okay. Well, I just let you know that we are working on teacher evaluation and principal evaluation. The evaluation process continues, and it is a slow process, but really appreciate the ideas that these young people have brought forward today. Thanks.
Thank you all, and we're right on schedule, and this hearing is adjourned.